Hey everyone, welcome to the Talking Cardboard podcast. Once again, I'm Nick.
I'm Cory.
And I'm John.
So let's get talking about some cardboard. All right. So one thing, if you listen to us, our first episode, thanks so much for coming back, and I'm glad we didn't scare you away. And if you did listen to that first episode, one thing we didn't do that we probably should have taken the time to do at the beginning was kind of introduce our own personal background into the board gaming hobby. So in this episode, myself, Cory, and John will give you a little bit of our background of getting into the hobby and what kind of board games we're most interested in. So I'll go first and start by saying, growing up as a kid in our neighborhood, we'd be playing board games outside a lot of the time during the summer months, and we found ourselves playing Pokemon Master a lot and Cranium. But it wasn't until I somehow stumbled across a copy of Avalon Hill's B17 Queen of the Skies at a friendly local game store called Phoenix Games, and that's actually like a pure dice simulation game where you're rolling a bunch of dice to simulate managing a B-17 over the skies of France and Germany in World War II. But that just opened up the hobby to me and made me realize all the different types of games that exist. And as you can see, fast forward a few years, I've amassed a little bit of a collection and consider myself a board game enthusiast. So that's a little bit about my background. Cory, how about you?
Yeah, so I grew up in a family that never played board games. Didn't play, any sort of card games, board games. Didn't play Hearts or any of those traditional card games either. Growing up through the years, middle school, I guess it started with elementary school with Magic the Gathering, and then middle school, Pokemon, that sort of thing. Got really into trading card games. A lot of my friends were into trading card games. More so for the collectible nature, but we also did play, at least Magic the Gathering the real way. But I started off with that, and then as I got into college, I started just kind of hitting Target hardcore in all the big box stores, and found these little card games on the shelf, and just I was intrigued with all these different, something other than a collectible card game, because that's all I really grew up with, that's all I really knew. And I was like, oh, this is new and interesting. Oh, this is new and interesting. Even though looking back on it, they're not really that interesting of games, but to me, any sort of variation from something I wasn't used to was completely new and fun to try. So my girlfriend at the time, which is now my wife, her and I would just completely, hit Target at least twice a week, see what new games were coming out. Found a friendly local game store down in Mankato, Minnesota, where I was going to college at the time, and I stumbled across Munchkin and thought that was the greatest thing since sliced bread, because that was just mind-blowing compared to anything else I've ever played. And they didn't really have a huge selection there, but I just started playing that and buying every expansion for it. So yeah, coming from not much of a board gaming background, really any new interesting twist on mechanisms was just completely eye-opening for me. So that is a little bit of my background.
And real quick, I was also going to end with the types of games that I'm now most accustomed or wanting to play would be kind of the Ameritrash games. I love rolling dice and kind of historic and or fictional war games, dudes on the map type games.
Yeah. For me, it's all about the mechanisms. So it's Euro games, heavy strategy. I'm not the best at them, but I like, from what I described earlier, finding new games with new interesting mechanisms and a twist on existing mechanisms really got me excited to discover those new things, and that just kind of evolved into what is now today. Over the last 13, 14 years of hobby board gaming, where I just seek out the next new cool thing, mechanisms wise, in a game.
Well, how about yourself, John?
Yeah, I actually probably have a more extensive background in gaming in general than I really thought. Growing up as early as elementary school, third grade, I think, I got into the Star Wars CG by Decipher. Also played the original Legend of Five Rings, Magic Gathering. The Pokemon collectible card game, was big around that time too. So that's where I really hit the ground. But I also was really invested in playing Risk. We'd play that with my grandparents, actually, when we used to go out on RV trips across across the country. So played a lot of Risk, and then actually played a lot of different games with some of the neighborhood kids that I grew up like from Millbourne to Rail Baron. Clearly, we played classics like Risk, Monopoly, because we wanted our friendships to end. But yeah, I guess I had a pretty big board game collection actually growing up, but it was all kind of those, children's type games that you would expect. But played a lot of different stuff, and then kind of got into more of the. I actually even played Axis and Allies probably when I was 12. Got into that with my uncle. Went over there for a couple weekends a year, and we would just play that. Even though at the time it took me like 2 weeks just to read the rule book and understand it. But yeah, from there met Cory and these guys, and have playing more of the mainstream and new games since then. So
Awesome.
And I would say the games I most enjoy are things like tile placement, Dune Imperium, so deck building, area control, card games. I still get sucked into almost type of card on the market, and Magic the Gathering. So
Great. So that's a little more about our board gaming backgrounds, and we definitely continue to play new games all the time. So with that said, what's perfect segue into games that we've been playing most recently, and we'll start with games that we've been playing together as a group. This first one we did mention in the episode number 1. This time we had a more honest playthrough, not almost completely honest, but more of an honest playthrough of the game Cuba Libre, which is the second in the Coin series, right, Cory? Number 2.
Second volume. Yep.
And this is based around
the Cuban Revolution. Nick. Come on. Revolution. Yeah, Fidel Castro, President Batiste, government, Che Guevara leading one of the insurgency forces, and then what do you got? The mob syndicate or whatever that is also operating at the time.
Yep. Yeah, and this time around, we made it through 2 or 3 propaganda cards.
3 at least. Yep.
Yeah, 3. Yep.
3. So, and it was definitely for me personally. I definitely was able to get into it a little more this time around. My one kind of gripe with the game is I feel like some of the actions that I had at my disposal I never thought about even trying to use. There was one where I suppress support, and my government faction was all about gaining support, and suppressing support potentially could help me if by some horrible situation there was opposition in one of my main cities, but I feel like that was really difficult for that to ever even happen. So as long as I had support in my main 3 cities, I didn't care about suppressing support elsewhere on the map I found. But
a little bit more situational of an action, probably.
Yes, and that's and that was the other thing too, is the thing that I think makes the game interesting, or probably any of the Coin games interesting, is the fact that you have the different event cards that are going to come out in a completely different order every single time, because those events can be very powerful depending on which faction is playing it for which of the effects. And I felt as a government the cards weren't going my way, but if we played the game again, maybe I would be getting good cards that were good for the government faction, and the other factions wouldn't necessarily have as good event cards to play. I don't know if you guys felt similar on that or not.
For me, I would like to try the shorter version of the game next time, where when you're setting up the deck, you have 4 equal stacks of cards, or somewhat equal stacks of cards, and you shuffle a propaganda card into each of the 4 sections. Before the game starts, you take out 2 cards out of each pile before shuffling those propaganda cards in. And I think that'll add even a little bit more variability too, not really necessarily being able to plan for certain events or knowing what's going to happen next. So it might add a little bit more randomness to the game, but also speed it up a little bit to where I feel like either any one of us could have won by the third propaganda or maybe even earlier in the game, and it just didn't happen because things were drawn out a little bit. And also maybe that sudden, I forget what it's called, the sudden propaganda
Yeah.
type alternate way to play. That might be kind of a cool thing too. You don't really know when that propaganda is going to pop, and you need to kind of plan and just be ready for it to happen at any moment. And I think that would be a fun thing to try too. But yeah, after playing it a few times now, it's definitely becoming more of a second nature and pretty easy to play.
You have any thoughts, John, that you wanted to share, John?
No, I thought it was fun, and obviously you look forward to a teach and play video on that as we tried to explain it as best as possible so that people can get not only into Cuba Libre, but into the Coin series games in general.
Yep.
Coming soon.
Yes. Yeah, that's a good teaser for a video on our Talking Cardboard YouTube channel. So if you're listening to the podcast, keep in mind Talking Cardboard also has a YouTube channel where we'll post this podcast and other juicy content like the teach and play of Cuba Libre. So with that said, we'll get into the next game that we tried as a group, and that was Rolling Heights, which is a game that was in Cory's collection. And Rolling Heights is by the designer John D. Clare, and John D. Clare also was the designer of Mystic Vale and then Dead Reckoning. Both Dead Reckoning and Mystic Vale use this innovative card crafting system that I think is credited to John D. Clare, and it basically is deck building, but instead of adding new cards to your hand, you're actually just modifying the cards you already start with. In the case of Mystic Vale and Dead Reckoning, but in Rolling Heights, there's I would say relatively innovative mechanism that John D. Clare introduces, which is rolling meeples to determine your actions. So yeah, Cory, if you want to kind of flesh out the other aspects of Rolling Heights, go ahead.
Yeah. So Rolling Heights, very simple, kind of like a press your luck game, but it didn't feel too much press your luck like other press your luck games. You could kind of mitigate your luck a little bit. You had a lot of extra reroll opportunities as well, but at its core, it is rolling meeples. The different color meeples are going to get you different resources to then construct these buildings, and you're building buildings throughout the city collectively. You're building in the same city, and depending on different adjacency bonuses and end game missions and kind of the during the game mission goal cards and that sort of thing, you're trying to work up the most amount of points before the end of the game. But yeah, I guess my experience with it, I enjoyed it. I think I might enjoy it more with more consecutive plays. Kind of understanding the building plans and the blueprints and that a little bit more, and how those can combo, and the importance of placing your plans in certain areas on the map and trying to gain those board bonuses and stuff like that. I thought it was a nice light game that didn't take a whole lot of brain power, and it was really fun to roll those meeples, but still provided enough, I don't know, enough to do in the game where I think it'll be fun to keep getting it to the table.
Yeah, I will be the first to say that it's visually appealing, especially towards the end of the game once you start getting the towers of your buildings built. And unless you were me and I was focusing on the housing projects that weren't so tall, but they got me points at the end of the game. The meeple rolling was unique, but I felt like, yeah, as Cory also mentioned, it sounds like there's supposed to be a little bit of a luck factor, but it's heavily mitigated because you get to always at least have half your meeples. You always get to at least use half your meeples. So if you have really bad rolling, which I like, then it prevents you from having zero actions, which would obviously then be horrible and boring. But at the same time, then it's kind of like, well, why don't I just you just get the meeples and use them for what they are, and why bother rolling them? But then it just adds, I guess, a little bit of randomness in terms of you don't know exactly what kind of materials you'll have. But I definitely appreciated the toy factor of this game. And yeah, John, what were your thoughts of Rolling Heights?
Yeah, I thought it was very unique with the rolling of the meeple, and I definitely was seeing a strategy coalesce amongst the buildings and victory kind of conditions that I had going. So I think there's definitely some depth there with the various tiles you can build onto. And then, kind of like Cory mentioned, I kind of built in my own little area, but there definitely is an advantage to paying attention to what others are doing and building adjacent to them as well.
Yep.
Hmm.
So
Yeah,
yeah, go ahead.
learning curve. I thought the learning curve was not knowing which tiles did what or which ones benefited you. Like I felt it kind of overwhelming to look at all the different tiles you could buy every turn. I would just kind of look at a few of them and just kind of randomly pick it. That's what I typically do when I'm playing a new game, just kind of to just feel it out that way, and not go after like a very solid strategy. But yeah, there's a lot of tiles that you can choose from to buy each round or each turn. So I think the familiarity with the tiles will definitely help with the next play.
I will say the game was also though learning curve maybe strategy wise, but it was a quick game to get start playing right away. It was not super rule heavy. At first, we felt like the game was trying to read through the rule book. It seemed at first the game was going to be kind of overly complicated, and we realized very quickly that you're just rolling your meatballs that you start with, and then slowly acquiring more and more that can do different things. So
Yeah.
yeah, with that said, we'll move in then to games that we just played on our own. And for me, the first game that I want to talk about is Exit the Abandoned Cabin.
Mm.
And I do want to, first of all, start by giving a spoiler alert warning. The exit games, if you're not familiar with them, are one-shot type games. You play them and you're pretty much done because they're like puzzle games, and once you solve the puzzle, it's not really fun to do it again. And specifically with the exit games, you are tearing them up as you go. Now, I want to give the first ever Talking Cardboard podcast shout out to my former coworker Nick and his wife Katie for coming over and playing Exit the Abandoned Cabin with my wife and myself. They also brought over some chicken marsala. That was fantastic. We really enjoyed working together and definitely want to play one of these again in the future. This was the first exit game that I have ever played. I've had it in my collection, not surprisingly, like most of my games, for several years. Finally got it to the table, and it comes with the what, it's a puzzle game, and it does have like hints included in the game, so if you ever get stuck with any of the puzzles, you're able to use them. We wanted to be tryhards and not use any or clues, I should say, is what they were called, and we wanted to be tryhards and not use any clues, but we did end up using 2 clues, but we're able to finish in about an hour and 10 minutes. And yeah, it was a fun experience. I definitely would try another one of the exit games. I feel like now they have like 30 different exit games out there, so hard to even know which ones are good or not. But I would say, yeah, Abandoned Cabin's a great one to start with if you are interested in that type of game. I don't know, Cory or John, if you've ever played any of those escape type games yet.
Nope, I haven't.
Okay.
I haven't
Seen
played
them around though.
any of the exit games, but I've played some of the other escape room games. The names are escaping me right now of the other ones.
Okay.
But no, not the exit. No.
Okay, no problem. And so the other game that I think I did mention in episode 1, which continues to take up space on my table behind me, and that is Liberty or Death, American Insurrection, another of the coin games. Just like Cuba Libre, this is the American Revolution coin game. I'm continuing to solo through it as the rebellion side, so the Patriots and the French against the Royalists, which are the British and the Indians. And right now, I think I have. If I was playing a 4-human player game, I would have won just now in the winner phase, is what they in Cuba Libre. The game was broken up by propaganda phases. In Liberty or Death, it's called winner quarters or winner phases or something like that. And yeah, so this first scoring round, I think I would have won, but I think the rules say if you're playing solitaire, you actually need to play through all of the event cards and still be winning at the end of the final winner card. So have been continue to be enjoying my time with that and learning how to utilize those AI flow charts, but would be equally interested in trying this with a few other human players, if only I knew of some that might be interested in playing this game with me at some point. But
there.
Looked like Cory and John, you didn't have any specific games you wanted to mention that you played on your own over this past week. Correct?
Nothing this week. I am trying to find some time to try Rolling Heights with my wife, just for the heck of it. I do want to get that to the table again and see how that differs with a two-player game. It might not be quite as fun, but I know the board state or the board map tiles change from player count too, so it might still feel just as tight as a two-player game. So I'd really like to try that one out. And then Clans of Caledonia, I would like to get that to the table with her soon as well. So those are definitely on our radar. We just haven't gotten the time to do it yet.
The next segment we'll do is the review of the BGG Hotness list. And last week, in our inaugural episode, we just kind of talked about what the BGG Hotness games were, top 10 Hotness games were last week, and moving forward, we'll just kind of discuss the changes of the Hotness list and to talk about the games that seem to be trending a lot in the hobby board gaming world. So I'll quick review the changes to the list. So at number 10, last week was Planet Unknown. Now we have number 10 as Arc Nova. Number 9 was Marvel Dagger. Now it is Heat Pedal to the Metal, which was previously at number 5. Number 8 is consistent. It was Dune Imperium last week, Dune Imperium this week. We have number 7 is, last week it was Earth. Now number 7 is a game called Expeditions, which looks to be
It's a sequel to Scythe.
sequel to Scythe. Then we have number 6, which was previously Arc Nova, but now it's Mr. President, which was actually previously number 2. And then number 5 is, last week was Heat Pedal to the Metal. Now number 5 is The Witcher Old World, which was previously number 4, so still hanging in strong there. Number 4 is a newcomer to the list, which is The White Castle. And previously number 4 was The Witcher. Number 3 previously was the Cyclades Legacy Edition, or whatever edition. Legendary Edition. Thanks, Cory. That's now off the list completely. And Gloomhaven is number 3, which I'll touch on in a second here. Number 2 is a new game as well, which is Everdale Far Shore. Previously it was Mr. President. And then number 1, which was previously Barcelona, completely off the list now. I never at least looked into what Barcelona was, so it was a one-hit wonder, I guess. But now it's Gloomhaven Buttons and Bugs, which is a solitaire, like extremely small, transportable version of Gloomhaven. It's big, huge brother or sister. And interestingly, there was a fan variant of Gloomhaven or a fan-made variant of Gloomhaven called Gloomholden, which is, as described in BGG here, a no table needed shrunk version of Gloomhaven. Apparently, it was just Gloomhaven distilled to just 18 cards. And Cephalofair Games, the publisher of Gloomhaven, decided to take that concept or design and turn it into an actually published game, which has been renamed Gloomhaven Buttons and Bugs. So it's a solitaire, small box version of Gloomhaven. Sounds very interesting. I have yet to really dig into how this will play or anything like that. But I can imagine there will be a just enormous audience for this, because a lot of people, in my mind at least, a lot of players enjoy playing Gloomhaven probably solitaire and just controlling multiple characters on their own. So I can only imagine the number of those players that are going to be equally excited about a solitaire exclusive, a compact version of Gloomhaven. Yes, with that said, did you guys have any comments about the changes to the top 10 hotness list.
More Gloomhaven stuff, as usual, taking over the world.
Yeah, it's crazy that they just announced a miniatures pack for Gloomhaven's second edition, and then Frosthaven just seems like that just was released.
Yeah, for me, Expeditions, the sequel to Scythe, which is a completely different game, but in the same world. I have been looking into that quite a bit and seems interesting. Plays in a lot faster playtime. It still has a little bit of card play and that sort of thing, and a few things that I enjoy. Scythe doesn't hit the table very often for us, so maybe Expeditions will kind of fill that void for us from here on out. And then, yeah, I'm just taking a look at the list here real quick. There was another one. I mean, the Everdell Far Shore is a new standalone for Everdell. Everdell, another game that we've played a few times, but kind of curious to see how that one plays differently. And yeah, the White Castle. I've never heard of that until tonight, and just reading the quick overview of the mechanisms in it. It seems interesting. It seems like it's got a few things going on that like Twa had back in the day, or in Black Angel, and some dice actions going on, which are usually kind of fun, and I normally enjoy that sort of thing.
Yep.
Yes, and not to be confused with White Castle. It has nothing to do with onion cooked burgers, so
White Castle.
don't get your hopes up too much there.
Sling them burgers.
Yeah, it's slightly different theme there. Cool. Well, with that said, we'll get into our next segment here, which will be a final countdown / top 5 list segment. This week's final countdown theme will be things we wish we knew about the board game hobby if we could, go back in time and start with these things in our minds when we first were getting in the hobby. And I would say maybe in the future these will be more weighted based in their ordering, but for this week we'll say that the numerical order is not super important in terms of the criticality of these things we wish we knew. But to start off, we'll go with number 5 as just the awareness of BoardGameGeek.com. And I can't remember the day that I learned of Board Game Geek. I would imagine it wasn't probably till I was at least 10, if not 15, when I first found out about the website. But it's a must, and it's kind of a must to be aware of if you want to get more into the hobby. Cory, yeah, you can extrapolate on that further.
Especially in today's environment with how many the numbers and masses of games coming out each year, thousands and thousands of new games, BGG kind of keeps it all a little bit more consolidated, and I really like being able to dive into a game, or when you hear about a game and get more like rules references or rules clarifications or frequently asked questions answered and that sort of thing right in one spot. Obviously ranking different games and seeing how those rank in your mind are kind of fun as well. But yeah, rules clarifications has been a big one for me from Board Game Geek, and also being able to download and print player reference sheets and things like that. The things that some of these people come up with are very helpful, very informative, very well done. So yeah, Board Game Geek is a one-stop shop for pretty much anything you'd need.
Yeah, I'm showing kind of my profile on Board Game Geek, and I've taken advantage, number 1, for the help with rules. I am a huge rule stickler, to the point where it kind of actually is bad. Like, it almost makes me like games less because I care so much about the rules at times, which is my own personal issue that I struggle with. But at the same time, that's what makes Board Game Geek so fantastic, is 90% of the time, if I have this burning question, I can post it to the forum, and generally, it depends on how popular the game is, but if it's a popular game, you'll get a response probably within an hour to whatever your question is, with a thorough answer too. It's not just knuckleheads like saying, "Oh, I have no idea what the answer is." They like generally provide evidence to why this rule should be interpreted this way. or that the designer has already said that the rule should be interpreted this way, or many times the designers themselves are active on BGG and will reply directly to rule threads about the games that they've designed. So that's definitely the major way that I've been leveraging Board Game Geek over the years and will continue to do so for the rest of the time. And it's also just a great way to document your own interest in the hobby. So, you can keep track of your plays of games in Board Game Geek. Of course, you can. Big part of the value of Board Game Geeks is ratings, and of course, it keeps track of how you've rated games yourself, and then it keeps track of your the number of games you have in your collection. So yeah, it's valuable in a lot of different ways. John, I don't know if there's some specific reasons you really appreciate or utilize BGG.
I was pretty much this many days old before I used BGG. But in all seriousness, I probably only started using it about a year ago to track plays, and I think the only other use I have for it is exporting the games I've rated so that I can rank them every year.
Yeah,
which is nice.
To summarize for someone that has no idea what BGG is, I would kind of consider it as the IMDb of board games. Back in the day, you frequent GameSpot or IGN, which are kind of the equivalents, I would say, for video games as to BGG, the one-stop kind of shop to understand, what board games are good or and what board games exist. And that's another kind of for anyone new to the hobby. If you really want to understand the depth and breadth of the hobby, go to Board Game Geek, go to categories, and pick a category that, wow, I like that. Like horror games. You can click horror. They have every category that hopefully one of these categories are of some interest to you in your life, because otherwise I don't think you'd be interested in anything, because it pretty much has every interest out there as a category. And let's just for fun say book, right? Book's apparently a category. And you get 4,351 games that have some sort of, connection to books. And then you can filter them further by name. But good way of ranking filtering, in my opinion, is number of ratings, because that kind of signifies popularity of a game. As well as, if a game's really good, it's going to have a lot of ratings, and vice versa. So, anyways, and then you could spend the rest of your life going through all 4,000 games, clicking on them, learning about what that game is, watching video. It quickly can, turn into a lifestyle, which is, you can tell I'm kind of speaking from experience here, but anyway, so
yeah, like the Game Informer magazine growing up, or the Game Informer magazines that are still going on today for video games. BGG is that for board games, and almost a collection of all the magazines that were ever created on board games in one spot electronically. So yeah, any of the hotness, any of the ratings, anything that publishers or designers or people are saying about games. Yeah, all that goodness that we used to, drool over in Game Informer over the latest video games coming out or about to come out, or the latest systems and the graphics, and you can really kind of dive into that with Board Game Geek over the cardboard side of things.
So, enough about BGG. Let's get into the next on things we wish we knew about board gaming at the start of when we got into the hobby. So number 4 is awareness of board game conventions. Now, this is definitely subjective to where you live around the world. Obviously, I would imagine in Idaho, your options for board game conventions are not going to be as much as if you're in Los Angeles, opposed to Florida, etc., etc. Or
Tower West in Las Vegas, Idaho.
Idaho is not too far from Vegas, you said?
I don't know.
Oh. Well, and around the world as well. There's the major con is the major three cons that you always hear about are Essen in Germany, UK Game Expo in UK, or I assume in London, and then and don't quote me on that, maybe it's somewhere else, and then Gen Con here in the United States in Indianapolis. But that's just scratching the iceberg. This well, yeah, the tip of the iceberg, because most states do seem to have at least one somehow tangentially related board game convention, if not a few. So um, this is another opportunity to see just a bunch of different. These are a great opportunity to see a bunch of different board games in one location at one time, and also be around other enthusiasts of the hobby. So maybe you're a huge fan of board games, but you're just not aware, you're not sure how you can find others that are in the hobby like yourself. Well, go to a board game convention. You'll meet tons of people that are just as obsessed with the hobby. Um, and yeah, Cory, I'll let you kind of explain tell your interest in conventions for board games.
Yeah, my take on it is I was surprised with the first convention that I went to. I was surprised at how I thought it was going to be intimidating and overwhelming and just this massive sea of people that, you know, I don't know. I guess I don't know what I was going to expect, but it turned out to be a lot more palatable than I thought. It was easier to navigate, easier to sit down and play games. Everybody was friendly and nice. The publishers were fun to talk to, and I guess it was just being a first time convention goer. I thought it was going to be a lot more difficult to really get into it or be involved with certain things. I was just really surprised and impressed with that. And then like our local convention here in Minnesota, the Con of the North, very surprised at how welcoming everybody was and how great it was to play games with people. And we were game masters at our local convention, so we were running games all weekend. And everybody who sat down to play games with me for the games I was running were just super into it, super fun. And they were all just there to have a good time. So I was definitely afraid to go to my first convention for multiple reasons, but glad I gave it a try and was surprised by the outcome.
Yeah, that's a good point, Cory. We wanted to touch on that. That don't be intimidated by board game conventions, and definitely, we're people that you can interact with. So feel free to come to us with questions. Again, we're still learning on how we can communicate via the Apple Podcasts and that sort of thing. But reach out to us on our YouTube channel, or we have other platforms too, and we can give you more tips and tricks about these conventions, because we've been to a few. My first convention was at Origins, which is in Columbus, Ohio, in 2015, and very big convention, maybe second to Gen Con in the United States in terms of size. And it was, you get what you put into it. If you want to spend a whole day looking at everything, you can do that. And if you want to just peruse all the different games for a couple hours, and that's all you have the social energy for, that's fine too. But yeah, don't be shy from going to a convention just because they might seem kind of overwhelming with all the badging stuff and everything when you try to register. Because I totally remember my first time, like, God, why is this so confusing? What's a badge even mean? Like, isn't it just a ticketed event? Can I just show up at the door? John, did you have any comments about conventions?
I've really only been to PAX Unplugged, but I gotta say, like, my expectation going in didn't match at all what we ended up doing. And there's a lot of stuff going on, and one thing we got roped into, well, not roped into, but kind of just fell into, was playing in Crokinole. And that was a blast, something I'd never seen or anticipated seeing and playing, but for fun. I honestly thought a lot of our time would just be looking at booths and sitting in panels, but ended up doing a lot of teach and plays for developers, and just open play. So pretty fun.
Yeah.
and meeting people. So
Cool. So we will move on to the number 3 thing that we wish we knew about the board game hobby, and that is that there are more games that exist than just the games you might see in your local big box store, such as a Target or Walmart. Um, don't think that that is all that exists. We've already touched on, Board Game Geek, and how, like I said, for one category of games there was 4,000 to choose from, which is just absurd, but that is literally what's out there. Now, obviously, a lot of those are not going to be commercially available. You might have to track them down secondhand, but what exists on the shelves in those bigger stores is just a smattering of what actually exists. Yeah, Cory, if you want to add to that, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say for the newer board gamers who are listening to this podcast or watching this on our YouTube channel, who may or just be kind of familiar with the games at Target or Barnes and Noble or some of those big box stores, I will say that those big box stores are getting a better selection of modern hobby board games now. So, but also to kind of hammer in the point, those are just, a very small scratch of the surface of what is actually out there. So if you've pulled all the games off the shelf at Target and all the games off the shelf at Barnes and Noble, and only partially enjoyed one out of the 10 that you bought, that's just a very small scratch. Take the one that you did enjoy, find out what you enjoyed about it, go to boardgamegeek.com, maybe put the mechanisms that you enjoyed out of that, or the theme you enjoyed, or the genre, and you'll just get thousands of other game options. You can rank them all from best to worst ranked. Like Nick said earlier, the amount of votes that they have on it is big too. What's popular? Usually what's massively popular, it's popular for a reason. It's not typically always the case in certain things in life, but I would say in board games that's generally true. If it's getting a lot of buzz and it maintains that buzz for a longer period of time than just a couple of months, there's something with that. So yeah, if you're kind of turned off from the hobby because you don't like very many of the games that you saw at those big box stores, find out what you did like about the one or two games and explore it more. Because I think you really will find hundreds of games that are really, really cool that you can share with other people too.
Yeah. Anything to add there, John?
nope, I think you guys covered it. Like Cory said, I guess the big thing is some of those big box stores are getting more, probably with the popular games. I know Target surprisingly had Dune Imperium now, which I will plug that 1,000 times whenever I can. So
It is the best game.
yeah, but I don't know if it's just Minnesota too. We just seem to have an abundance of game stores as well around us. That just makes it easier for people to go out and see a wider selection.
Yeah, that's true. I think it does seem like we have a decent amount of local game stores in our metro area, which may not be the same for your location from wherever you're listening. So, great.
Even more all the reason that if you only have a Target nearby or a Walmart or what have you, to seek out other games that interest you from what you do like out of those big box stores, and maybe just shop on Amazon or shop on a online game store and have them shipped to you. Because like you said, that's a good point. Not everybody has a lot of local game stores to check out.
Yep.
So.
Yep. And with that, that's maybe a good segue into number 2 on the list here of things we wish we knew, which is not all friendly local game stores are created equal. And first, again, prefaced by, well, if you don't even have a friendly local game store in your area, then I guess you can kind of tune out here for a minute. But for those of us that might have couple friendly local game stores within driving distance, and you go to one and you were really disappointed with its service for whatever reason, understand that that's not a reflection of all the local game stores that exist. I will say my experience oftentimes hasn't been the most positive when I interact with the workers at local game stores. And part of it, I think, might just be a reflection of the typical personality of the typical board gamer, which is one that maybe is more reserved and maybe isn't as outspoken as another other classic car salesman person might be, and that might be a little off-putting. But regardless of that point, friendly local game stores are really important for the growth of this hobby because they do allow people in one store to see the whole variety of games that exists, and we don't want it's if you are able to go ahead and stop by your friendly local game store, definitely take that opportunity because they really need your business to be successful. And Cory, feel free to add to what I'm saying.
Yeah, I would just say with my personal experience, it hasn't always been the best. So I guess my biggest word of advice to people would be, if you do find a friendly local game store that you do like and that has a really good selection and everybody is friendly and that sort of thing, I would still Google search for other friendly local game stores in your area and give them all a try. Because just if you have a poor experience with one or a good experience with one, either way, it doesn't really necessarily mean it is the best local game store in your area. One might have that better selection that you're looking for. One might have that friendlier staff. And I've really gotten burned a couple times. Like I said, down in southern Minnesota when I was going to college down there, where my vision or what I envisioned as a local game store was only based off of the one that I visited in their mall down there. And yeah, the staff was friendly enough. And I thought their selection was real good because everything I had seen, other than Warhammer 40K and Magic cards, everything else was new to me. But now looking back on it, they really didn't have a good selection at all. They had Munchkin and Killer Bunnies and just all these other games that are just, I don't know, just these entry level, not the greatest games. And, had I searched for other locations, I think my eyes could have been open to a lot more of the goodness of the hobby a lot sooner.
Friendly local game stores, that was number 2. I was going to add one more thing. If you go to a friendly local game store, you didn't get maybe the best assistance that you would have liked to have in picking out a game, or if you feel like you just want to have a better idea of what to look for before you go to the friendly local game store. In either situation, again, I'm plugging Talking Cardboard as a resource for you to reach out to and ask us questions about game suggestions. Today, I was on one of the board game Facebook groups, and I basically wrote an essay for someone looking for a game to help, support leadership qualities or something like that. So, we all enjoy giving suggestions and that sort of thing. So definitely take our free advice. Don't have to use it, but it is what it is. So keep that in mind too.
You didn't even charge that much either, so
maybe I should. Maybe I need to start charging. I give good game advice. At least I think I give good game advice. All right. So number 1 on our list of things we wish we knew about the hobby is Kickstarter FOMO. If you're not super familiar with the board gaming hobby, a big part of it is the fact that every week there's tons of Kickstarter projects or other types of crowdfunded board game projects on GameFound, other sites that are coming out every week, and they look super awesome. They generally have all these miniatures that look awesome. They generally say that it might not be available in retail, that if you don't get this, you'll regret it for the rest of your life. And it's very tempting not to click that back button. I am trying myself to do a better job of restraining myself from clicking that back button. But at the end of the day, if you don't back a game, most likely you are not going to regret that, because you'll realize a year or two later, first of all, you'll probably forget about the game within a couple months. And then second of all, within the next year or two, you'll see something better anyway, and you'll have forgotten about that game. Or what often happens is there's a second print run of that game, and then the second print run comes with rule clarifications or improved rules or whatever, and then hopefully more feedback of the game of your first print of the game, so that you can make a more informed buying decision if it's worth backing the second edition or not. Or you have one of your wonderful friends get that first edition of the game and you can play that. There's a lot of different reasons why you shouldn't let Kickstarter FOMO ruin your life. Cory, feel free to elaborate on that too.
Yeah, for me, I have been burned quite a bit with this, where you back a game at the time, like Nick said, it looks really sweet, it looks innovative, it looks awesome, cool minis or Kickstarter exclusives or Game Found exclusives that you won't get if you buy the retail version, or like Nick said, it's not coming out to retail at all. So if you don't back it, you're never going to get to play the game, and that's just simply not really the case anymore. There are a lot of local game stores that do back have the store backer pledges, to where you can give it some time and let it kind of stir it in the pot and let it kind of sizzle for a bit, and read other people's opinions on it if they've gotten a preview copy of the game, or other channels or reviewers, and really kind of do more research on it before you just have that fear of missing out and press the back button, because more times than not, you're either, like Nick said, going to forget about the game. It's really not going to be as big of a deal as you thought it was at the time. And there's plenty of other games that are coming out to retail within that 1 to 2 year span that you're waiting for a game to come in the mail that might actually be the next best thing since sliced bread. And a lot of games that are like, hey, this is just like so-and-so game that was on Kickstarter a year ago, yet better and improved upon. And then you just you have that kind of feeling in your stomach when that game does come in the mail eventually, where you're just like, I'm just not really, I'm more interested in these other games, and you just throw it on, the aftermarket, and try to get rid of it. So yeah, just something to be conscious of. It's only cool. Your adrenaline's only going for so long, before that feeling wears off.
Yep. Do you suffer from Kickstarter FOMO, John?
Nope. I've purchased one Kickstarter game and I will never get it, and that is $2 evaporated. So I will never make that mistake again. I prefer just get what I'm paying for. I can. If I really want to play something, I'll get it secondhand after the fact.
Sounds good. All right. Well, that was our top 5 things we wish we knew about games when we got into the hobby, or things we wish we knew about the hobby when we first got into the board game hobby. So hopefully for those that are new to this hobby, you'll take all of those and use them to your advantage moving forward. So with that, we'll get into our next segment, which is our question of the week. And this week's question is, what do you think of app-based board games, or board games that require digital apps to play? So many board games that have been released now, probably over the last, I don't know when the very first one came out. I remember XCOM, the board game, was maybe one of the first to leverage a digital app that was basically required to play the board game. And since then, several of these types of games come out every year. One of the more recent, I'd say, kind of prolific ones was Descent 3rd Edition, since 2nd Edition didn't require an app, and then that was a pretty big game, and 3rd Edition comes out and required you to use an app to play it. And there's definitely many more examples than those. But we figured we'd kind of talk about if that's okay that board games come out with apps, or if board games have to stay 100% analog. And I'm still of the opinion that I don't mind app-based board games at all. I just want to hope that app-based board games never become the mainstream type of game in the hobby. So far, that seems to be the case, where they've been kind of a niche type of game. But I definitely play board games mostly because I like the fact that it's 100% analog, and I don't have to worry about using technology opposed to playing, of course, a video game on a computer or PlayStation. Cory, what are your thoughts on app-based games?
Yeah, I don't. They don't really bother me at all. I do like some app-driven games, like Mansions of Madness Second Edition is a game I can't really imagine not playing with an app. It really adds kind of like thematic music along with it, and changes up the decisions that you're doing in the game from game to game, and really opens up a space for games to become variable and ever evolving and that sort of thing, with not necessarily with patches or anything like that, but you can throw expansions into an app driven board game by just creating the software for it and throwing an app update, or purchase expansion through the app digitally, which is really cool. I will say there are plenty of games I haven't bought that have looked interesting just because they are app driven. Um, because certain games that it requires everybody to have a phone while you're playing, or everybody to have that app while you're playing, kind of turns me off a little bit. If I'm going to play with my parents or other family members who don't necessarily have their phones on them 24/7, or everybody's phones nowadays, their batteries are at 1% by the time you get to the 6 o'clock for game night anyway. So requiring somebody to have a fully charged phone that's going to drain before the game's over anyway, and oh, by the way, all seven of you have to have that app, is kind of a turnoff to me. So I do prefer all analog, but I do understand there are some situations in games where I think the app is really cool.
Mm-hmm. John.
So, and I know John plays. You play some more app driven games than I think
Yeah,
I.
one game specifically is the Lord of the Rings Journeys in Middle Earth RPG, and that is fully app driven. I believe we quite but we set it up nicely with the computer and put screen and run the app there. And it shows you the map and how to set everything up. It gives you text for what's happening, what you need to do. I think that actually works pretty seamlessly as long as you know how to set it up appropriately. But other than that, it's not really cumbersome because Imperial Assault has a similar app. Grant play that without the app, technically as long as player. But overall, not a lot of games I've played that require an app. But I guess I don't have any particular.
But so I heard talk about Journeys through Middle Earth, which uses the app, which is actually kind of based from my understanding, kind of around the Mansions of Madness app, but with a Lord of the Rings reskin from Fantasy Flight, and then I forgot the other game that John just mentioned, but
Imperial Assault.
Imperial Assault has an app that you can kind of like a
Yeah.
add-on app. So
pretty much replaces the Imperial players.
Yep.
To have that fifth person.
Which is nice. I mean, I do like that. That's kind of like a good compromise. You can play the game without the app, and then with the app, it adds just a whole another layer to the cake. So that would be kind of like the preference for a game to me with an app, is like you can play without the app, but with the app you get a lot more with the game. So
Yeah, like the game that comes to mind for me real quick too, it's called Alchemists, and it's a Euro game where you're trying to formulate these hidden formulas. You're an alchemist, and you're trying to find the right combination of ingredients pretty much for your potions and that sort of thing. And the app is really what drives. You can guess at what the secret ingredients are for your potion, and the app is what drives if you're on the right track or not. And you can play the game completely analog if you want one person to sit out all game and be that person for you. There's an analog way to do it, but that's just one example of a game that I would need a fully charged phone and the app for it and that sort of thing that I haven't bought yet. That looks really interesting. And then also to add onto that too, if more games came out with an app for solo play for certain games, like for example the Coin series of games, or any of those other games where you have to read through flowcharts to run bots, or even if you're playing like a three-player coin game, for example, and you need that fourth player, if you had a bot for that just ran decisions through, I don't know how they would do that. They probably couldn't. But other games that traditionally are not solo, but the app could act as another human player to then therefore make it solo, I think would be a really cool integration.
awesome. So then we'll conclude that question of the week there. So then let us know, of course, your thoughts too. If you are watching the YouTube video, put your comments as to whether you like app-based games or don't like app-based games, or your favorite app-based games. We'd love to hear from you. With that said, we'll move on to our final segment here, which is what does Talking Cardboard have on its horizon? Right now, we're trying to work on being involved with the Settlers of Catan tournament, which would be July 22nd at a local, I want to say it's either game store or brewery within the Twin Cities area. We're working with another event organizer, trying to part with them board games specifically to be present at this tournament and help create some excitement and buzz for that. So if you're in the Twin Cities area and are a fan of Settlers of Catan, definitely keep an eye out for this. And with that, I don't think we had any other major Talking Cardboard news other than what we discussed last week. Cory, John, anything you wanted to bring up otherwise?
Just what John mentioned earlier, we have a teach and play of Cuba Libre that'll be posted to the channel here soon, and we're gonna try to do I think a lot more of those teach and plays. I think they're interesting, where we do a brief overview teach of the game, and then we run through a few rounds of the game to kind of show you how the gameplay is live in action. So that's kind of a cool way to learn a game if you learn by actually seeing it done. That's definitely a good way to learn new games. So we're going to try to do more of those. And we did our first episode of the Teach and Play with the Revive board game, which is a new Euro game. And then our second episode will be for Cuba Libre, which is volume 2 in the coin series. So stay tuned for that.
Wonderful. So with that said, thanks again for listening if you're hearing us on a podcast, or for watching this video if you're watching the YouTube video of this podcast episode. We appreciate your attention. Definitely like, subscribe, and again, comment on our videos, send us questions, give us ideas for the podcast if there's something you think would be really cool for us to do on the show. And then continue to also look for us on our Twitter account, TikTok, join our Discord, and also if you are feeling generous, definitely we appreciate your contributions to our Patreon. With that said, I'm Nick from Talking Cardboard. Thanks for listening to another episode of the Talking Cardboard podcast. Bye.